Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled to welcome a fellow podcaster, an artist, a teacher, and host of the Avrum Rosensweig Show. Please help me welcome Avrum Rosensweig. Avrum, how are you?
Thank you, John. Yeah, I'm doing really well. It's really nice to be on your podcast, and I appreciate the invitation very much. Thank you.
I had so much fun when I was on yours, too. I had a great time there. So I think it's a good thing to reciprocate. So
Yeah. No, you were marvelous, too. I really enjoyed hearing about your life. You're quite a colorful guy, and you have a great passion for the Jewish people. So that's everything for me.
As you, let's turn it around now. So I was reading, you have a lot of fascinating things in your own life. First of all, but I want to go back really to the beginning. So you grew up in Ontario. Your father was a rabbi. Okay, so your family was very religious.
Yes, I would say so. My father was an Orthodox rabbi, and he was a small C conservative individual. Everybody, all my sisters to this day, and most of my nieces and nephews and great nieces and nephews are religious. I'm not, though, anymore.
I have to hear about that because that's fascinating to me, though. First of all, your dad was very strict growing up, or no?
Yeah, in his own way, he was. He really expected a lot. I was the only son. We had 5 siblings, 4 sisters and myself. And the way it works in a family like that is there's an expectation that the son, in particular if he's the only one, will grow up to be a Ben Torah,
Right.
which means a religious Jew who ensconces themselves in the study of Torah and follows halachic way, which is Jewish law.
So how did you get? I mean, you grew up that way. So what led you out of wanting, being religious, I guess?
I was really curious about what bacon tasted like. It smells so good, I'll tell you what it was, Jonathan. I grew up in Kitchener, Ontario, which is a small city about an hour west of Toronto. And again, because my father was the rabbi there, and we were the only Orthodox family,
Right.
there were a lot of expectations on me as to how I was supposed to live, how I was supposed to be. And when you live a halachic lifestyle, a Jewish law, in a way which is in concert with Jewish law, and nobody else is, there's a sense that everybody else is having a great time and you're not. At least in terms of the day to day. And I felt like I was choking on Jewish law, and I had to take a break from it.
Your father is your father still with us or no?
My father passed away in 1989 at 61 years old.
Oh, that's young. Yeah. No. So was he around when you started to make the decision that you're not going to follow? Yes. Oh, so how did that go over?
Not too well.
Yeah.
He wasn't, but I'll tell you the interesting thing, Jonathan. My father was born in 1928.
Okay.
And he sort of came from that place in life whereby men were not highly effusive. They didn't speak about what was on their mind too much. Emotionally, my father was not very comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing, it was that generation. So
Yeah.
the best thing for him really was we kind of pretended this wasn't happening. And until the day he died, we really did not have a talk about it.
Really, just gloss it. Yeah. I know that. My dad was not like that, but I know very many people like that. I'm always just fascinated, like people who grew up, religious. I have I know a rabbi who I love actually here, and one of his kids is also is not anymore, and he's really. I mean, we're talking Chabad here, so it's always fascinating to me. And it's fascinating the other way. I think when I was on with you, I think I mentioned too, because my daughters. Now, one of my daughters, my oldest, went to Israel, and she came back way more religious than I ever was. So I'm always fascinated going from one to the other, kind of.
Is that good? Like, are you cool with that?
Yeah, you know what? To me, if they're going to stray one way, I guess I'd rather be that way. than the other, I guess.
Good point.
Like we talked about, like being Jewish is very important to me. So I am happy that it's being followed still,
Right.
regardless. But it's much more than I ever was. And I was not reform or anything. I grew up, kind of observant, but this is way more than I ever was. Let me ask you about you. So now you lived up. You just mentioned it. You lived in an area that was not very Jewish. So, and I lived a lot of times the same, where I grew up in certain times in my life. So how is that for you? Now, did you experience anti-Semitism in the neighborhood?
Yeah, I was born in Kitchener, as I said, and the name of Kitchener prior to that was Little Berlin.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, excuse me, a lot of people came over from Germany
Oh my gosh.
before
At
and
that
after
time,
the.
wow. Okay.
Oh yeah, my closest friend's name was Helmut Eater.
Gotcha.
Really, and
Yeah.
actually, he's just been in touch with me recently. But yeah, I did experience some anti-Semitism, and I was not comfortable with it. And after kindergarten, after being chased around the schoolyard by 5-year-olds, I was 5, and yelling at me these anti-Semitic epithets,
Really?
I came home. Yeah, I'm serious. I came home after kindergarten, and I said to my dad, I said, Dad, I'm not wearing a kippah anymore to school. And good for him. He said, okay.
So, I mean, so it started as young. So this was out throughout your whole school year or your school career, I guess, your school life?
Anytime anything Jewish was needed to be answered, I was the guy. And the flip side to
You
that
spoke for the
was
whole religion.
I
In
spoke
school.
for the entire Jewish people for 3,000 years, actually. And the flip side to that was when there was anti-Semitic stuff going down, I was the guy who was sought after. So, yeah, I experienced some anti-Semitism. Yes.
Wow. You and I, when we spoke, I had a lot of the same experiences as you. We have a lot of similarities. So I grew up also in a school. I was in high school. I was one of my only 4 Jews in that school at the time. So it was, and I got into a lot of fights because of it. So you also had to do that. I mean, at times.
Yeah, I was really fortunate. It wasn't so much fighting. There was a lot of uh, anti-Semitic stuff that was hurled at me. People would throw pennies and things like that. But I didn't get into too many fights.
So you graduated school. So what? I saw that you moved to Israel. Okay, yes. So when did that come about? Right, that was right after high school.
Right. So the way it worked is that I went to public school in Kitchener until the end of grade 8. Then my parents sent me to yeshiva in Toronto, Ner Israel Yeshiva,
How far away
which
from
is
you were Toronto? How far away from you from there?
about an hour.
Okay.
Now it's an hour and a half because traffic is really bad. But the Ner Yisrael Yeshiva was a very and is a very right wing, Haredi, very religious yeshiva. And I went there from grade 9 until grade 13. We had grade 13 in Ontario, and I slept in
What?
dorm.
Just curious. What made your parents decide to send you there?
Listen, Jonathan, my father was an extraordinarily Orthodox man.
Okay.
He was a rabbi. He himself had gone to yeshiva in Toronto and for a little while in New York. My mother was religious. There was always this understanding that whenever one of us would turn 13, that we would be sent off to Israel. So I was the last of the 5. And by the time I arrived in Israel, in Toronto, I'm sorry, I would go to Toronto to yeshiva. By the time I arrived in Toronto in 1973, all my sisters were here already, and they were going to religious girls' school.
They were going. So that's what prompted them to send you to the yeshiva. And this was you went every day. It's not like a sleepaway thing, right?
I slept in dormitory.
Oh, you did sleep in the dorm. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
How did the other kids treat you?
Well, on one hand, I acclimatized pretty quickly. I'm one of those guys you can drop me, in the jungle in Cameroon, and I'll quickly make friends with the tribes. But on the flip side, they made a lot of fun of me because I was this little hick kid from, not rural Ontario, but close to it,
Right.
and I used to say a lot. How you doing, eh?
Isn't that all Canadians in general, though?
Well, yes, yes, but if you're brought up in the religious community here in Toronto, propensity for saying "a" is a little bit less. But I used to say it a lot. I was somewhat like a Canadian, very Canadian in nature. So they used to poke fun at me. The difficult thing, Jonathan, was that because my father was a rabbi in a shul that did not have a mechitza, a division down the middle for men on one side, women on the other side, people used to say nasty things to me about my father. They would say oh, your father's reform or your father's conservative. Not that that's nasty in of itself, but my father was an Orthodox rabbi who spent his whole life teaching Torah helping community members in terms of growing as Jews. And they would just say nasty things. And this increased more so when I moved to Jerusalem.
This was said by you. You heard all this?
I heard all this, and because it was directed at me. It got worse when I moved to Jerusalem. I went to yeshiva in 1978, 79, also extraordinarily right-wing yeshiva in Jerusalem, right near the Green Line. And the guys there some of the guys were very nasty about who I was, how I grew up, who my father was. And I took a lot of umbrage to that because my father sacrificed his life for the Jewish people, and he did so as an Orthodox Jew.
I think we're seeing it's like, the sit down on the couch. I think we're seeing the roots of you wanting to leave the religion here a little, not the religion, but the Orthodox aspect. So what prompted you to go to Israel to begin with?
These were all expectations, Jonathan. Like
your parents wanted you to do this.
All expectations. It was clear that when I finished grade 8, I would go to yeshiva in Toronto, and I was there for 5 years. It was really clear once that was finished, I would take a gap year and go to Israel and study in Jerusalem.
Did you voice any protest, or you just couldn't at that time?
I am 64 years old, so I was born in 1960. Because of the nature of my family, where my father was king,
right,
and the lack of development of my own emotionality, as one of my bosses used to call it, I didn't know I had the ability to say anything.
Wow. So what happened when you were there? You mentioned the school. What were your experiences in Israel overall, though? What did you feel about the country at that time?
I adored it. Oh, I absolutely adored it. I remember waking up the first morning there and seeing a woman walking by my where I was staying at my uncle's for a few days in Jerusalem, and she had a basket perched on her head because that was the mode of sort of transporting things according to that culture. And I remember too waking up and hearing the blowing of the shofar, because it was the month of Elul, before the high holidays, when we blow the ram's horn. And all these little things really reminded me I'm in a Jewish state. I walked outside in the morning. I went to davening, to put on tefillin. And I remember seeing an electrician up on one of the wires of the poles wearing a kippah. And I thought, ooh, that is pretty cool, I love the country. I love it.
How long did you live there?
I was there for a year, but I went back other times. And later on, I was engaged to a Yemenite woman. So we lived in Netanya together for a while. It's another podcast. Yeah.
Look, what you just said strikes so much. I lived there as a kid. I think, we talked about that. I did live there as a kid, and I went back later on as an adult, and I was so happy that I did, to see through an adult lens. But it's just nothing like it. That you look around and you're going from a country where you're the other, to now to everywhere is like you. And the majority is, not everyone, but the majority is like you, and it's just such a different feeling.
Yes.
To you, it really got to me. It really struck me. So, did you ever consider at that point, like making Aliyah or anything, or no?
Yeah, it's one of my great regrets in life that I have not made Aliyah. I have an 18-year-old son, Noah, who's my gift from God. And my hope is that, God willing, when he's independent enough, when he's on the road, and I make a little bit more money and I can do so, I'd very much like to move to Israel. I really want to move to Israel. I want to, yes.
I think about that often as well. Would I do it at one point in my life? I never used to think that, but now I've been considering it more and more. So
maybe we'll live next to each other.
We'll be neighbors.
Yes. Yeah, we'll be neighbors. Yeah, yeah.
we can live in the same apartment, like an odd couple type thing.
Jonathan, I need some sugar. I'm coming down. Yeah.
Well, so having lived in Israel, what was your initial reaction, the gut reaction when October 7th happened?
I woke up that morning. It was Shabbat, and it was Simchat Torah, the Jewish holiday, which we commemorate the giving of the Torah. And I had to do a service at a local temple, Congregation Habonim. And I was watching the news, and I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
But Jonathan, do you remember when the planes went into the World Trade Center?
Very much. I remember exactly where I was. Yeah.
Right? Where were you? I'm just curious.
I was I was day trading at the time. Actually, I used to be a day trader, and I was in front of the computer screen and in front of the TV. And when they I woke up after the first one had hit, and so they were talking about it. At that point, I suspected terrorism at first, but you're not sure. You just think maybe it's just a terrible accident. But everyone was talking about it. But while I was watching, they're live. You see the second plane going. And at that point, all doubt is erased already at that point. So it was like I was here in Florida. I had just moved here. It was only a few months before, and it was just. I remember that numb feeling, and I just wanted my family around me. I wanted my kids. I wanted to hold my kids. It was only my daughter then. It was just my oldest daughter at that time, and I wanted her with me. It's like it was just a weird reaction that because we're not there in New York anymore. I'm from New York, but I wasn't there anymore. But I wanted my daughter around me right then, just to protect her. How about you?
Yeah, the reason I reference October 9/11 is because I remember watching the planes go into World Trade Center, and something in my consciousness couldn't believe it. Like I said,
Right.
no, this is not true. There's no way. And the same thing happened with me on October 7th, whereas I looked at, remember there was a video that first came out
Right.
of probably 10 terrorists on a pickup truck,
Mhm.
stopping, unloading, get with their machine guns. And I thought, okay, fine, just take the fuckers out,
Right.
right? Just take them out. What's the problem here?
Yeah.
And then soon enough, you start to hear that there were 3,000 terrorists
Right.
who piled into Israel, through the gate. And I went to shul and I stood up there leading the services. I thought I wouldn't be able to speak. Honestly, I thought I would be dumbfounded, not have the ability to say anything. And I began by saying, ladies and gentlemen, everybody here has heard the news, and we need to talk about it a little bit. And we need to dedicate this service to the well-being of all Israelis and all Jews. And somehow I stumbled through the service. I was able to do it. And then, the rest of the day unfolded.
You. How did you first find out? You're watching TV or social media?
Yeah, I like to relax a little bit before I do service. So I would turn
Right.
on the news. I was watching CNN, and the news quickly came out.
Yeah. I when I remember waking up that day, it was like the first thing I do is I go. Really, it's like insane. I go and check Twitter like every morning just to see what's going on in the world, and I was stunned, and that's when I ran to the TV to see what was going on as well
Yeah.
live. But yeah, it was just it was insane. So, how did you feel in the months after that? I'm going to get back to your youth in a second, but how do you feel in the months after that? After that happened.
Yeah, I'm generally a pretty boisterous person. I like to have fun. I like to laugh. I like to enjoy myself. I like to be really silly. But I found myself sort of a depression had taken me over,
Yeah.
or perhaps we'll call it a melancholy feeling or sadness. And I was like every Jew, or like most Jews in the world, on a day-to-day basis, so incredibly distraught. And then, excuse me, the protests began, as they did in Florida, as they did in New York, as they did in France, as they did in Toronto, and they were absolutely vile,
Yeah.
absolutely vile. So I was both scared for me, scared for my son, scared for my family, and disgusted, and just incredibly angry
Yeah.
at the idea that people would speak about our people in the way that they were, because I think we're an absolutely beautiful people who do wonderful things for the world, albeit with pockmarks. I don't deny that, but I was just disgusted, and I am to this day, that these people who are so vile themselves are holding us in judgment as baby killers and other awful things. It disgusts me.
I think social media is a cesspool for the most part, but I don't remember if we talked about this or not. It's one of the funny things is that, I'm a writer and my social media feed always used to be, it showed up, I followed other writers. And that's what came up that because of the algorithms and everything. Since then, it's like I follow all these Jewish accounts, all these things again. I don't see really any writing for the most part on my social media page. It's all like on Twitter. All I see is like Jewish accounts, what's going on in Israel, what's going on in the world with other Jews, and that's my feed. That's because that's what I'm interacting with all day long right now. So, all right,
Yeah, so
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I understand it. My feeds have changed dramatically as well, and I have to really force myself to be somewhat eclectic in terms of how I read or how I watch social media, because you can really get embroiled in your own way of thinking, and that's not necessarily healthy, right?
Um, it depends. Look, I think it's really good to get a broad variety of ideas and exchanges, and not just you get the echo chamber. But sometimes you feel like you need to get back out and just be with like
For
minded.
sure.
Yes,
Oh, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I feel my gut just sort of relaxes a little bit when I hear people espousing my point of
right.
view
Yes,
or my great love for the Jewish people. But like I said, Jonathan, I do force myself to listen to other point of views,
I do
other
as well.
people who you have to,
Yeah,
because it's those individuals who are just so unidimensional in their thinking, that those are the ones who have the propensity of becoming extremists.
well,
And
that's
I don't
that's the
want,
problem in all the countries right now is that there are too
yeah,
many divisions instead of like talking to each other. I agree with you on that totally.
yes,
And so, all right, we'll go back to you now. So, well, you lived in Israel, you came back to Canada, so you joined the United Jewish Appeal in Toronto. So you started a humanitarian, and then you started right the humanitarian organization Via Hafta. So,
yes.
how did you come to that? What's the organization? Tell me about it and what it does, and what prompted you to start it. It's like so impressive, by the way. It really is.
Oh, that's nice of you to say that. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that very much. I decided in 1989, it was the year my father passed away, that I was going to do community work. The 80s were my lost years. I really didn't know where I was going. And I was a headhunter and I was a commodities broker and all that stuff. I really had no sense. But the truth of the matter is that road did ultimately lead me to community work. In other words, the process of elimination. I don't want to be a commodities broker, right? I don't want to be a headhunter, but I do want to be a community worker, and it was in my DNA. So I started working for the United Jewish Appeal, and I did so for 7 years. In 1994, when the genocide in Rwanda happened and the war in the Balkans happened, I was very, very disenchanted by the response of the Jewish community. Excuse me. We were pretty quiet. And while there were organizations like the American Jewish World Service or the Joint Distribution Committee, who did help in humanitarian ways, most of us did not live up to the adage of never again.
Right.
At least never again the way I defined it. The idea that when there's an injustice in the world, not necessarily of our own or specifically of our own, but other people's, like Rwanda,
Yeah.
that we would be loud about it. We would be a bit very vocal about that injustice, but we weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And Rwanda was dismal. I just interviewed two individuals who were survivors from Rwanda. And I have to tell you something, Jonathan. One of the individuals who I spoke of, she's an activist. Her name is Providence. She's a lovely human being. She told me about the slaughter of her entire family.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And when you hear their stories,
Yeah.
they are not that much different than the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So I decided, after watching these wars on nightly news, that it was incumbent upon we in Canada as Jews to have a humanitarian response or to create one. So for a long time, I sat and I wondered, okay, how is this going to play out? It took me about 2 years to develop the mission statement. And probably, I think by the time we hit 1996, I started incorporating Via Hafta and getting our appropriate documentation and making it legal. And it was born Via Hafta, the Canadian Jewish Humanitarian Relief Committee. And by 1997, we were operating.
And the organization's still in effect today, right?
The organization is in effect. I've retired from it after about 18 years,
Right.
and it's run by an individual who's extremely astute, very Jewish in nature, and it's a beautiful organization.
I just want to play devil's advocate, and I do feel I agree with you 100% that if something's going on, we have a responsibility, not just as people, Jews as well, but also as people to go something like that. What happened in Rwanda, it's happening, it was horrific. There's so many places in Africa where there are just general atrocities happening right now. I will say though, to counter the one thing, I don't see any other organizations getting involved when it's Jews, something going on with Jews. That's from all these things, from the Red Cross, who's a disgrace, the Red Cross as well. Anytime it's Jews, it's turned the other way. Yeah. So that's one of the things that, when's the next time the Red Cross goes to check on the status of the hostages will be the first.
Listen, I understand what you're saying. I have had partnerships with non-Jewish organizations, both when it comes to humanitarian work here in Toronto and abroad and in Israel, because Veahavta did some work in Israel. One of the pillars of Veahavta, Jonathan, was to create a Kiddush Hashem. You know what I mean by that?
No, please.
A Kiddush Hashem is, let's say you go out and you're wearing your kippah, and you do a beautiful thing for somebody that other people can see, right? That's a Kiddush Hashem. It's making God's name holy. I wanted Veahavta to be out in the world as Jews, very high profile. So not only do we do what's incumbent upon a Jew to do, Veahavta l'reach et kamocha, you should love your brother and your sister as you love yourself, the central tenet to our peoplehood, our religion. But I wanted people to see it. Yeah. And so therefore we have a van, we have a few vans that go out into the street every single night to help the homeless with volunteers, Jew and non-Jew. Yeah. And on the side of the van are some very clearly stated Jewish quotes. We worked in Guyana, we worked in Zimbabwe, in Haiti, in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and we always made every effort to let our partners know and the locals know that we are Veahavta, the Jewish humanitarian organization from Toronto, and we are here to help our fellow citizens of the world. I wanted us to make friends, or at least that people who are on the fence having to do with the Jewish people and who we are, I wanted perhaps to sort of push them a little bit further into a place where they go, yeah, my son was helped by that Jewish doctor. Call it opportunistic. I don't give a shit. Yeah. We'll make friends any way we need to. And it was very effective.
I was just about to ask you about that stuff. I saw about all the things that the countries that you sent to. How difficult was that to organize for you to send teams out to these other countries? I mean, that seems like a very difficult task, just reading about that.
Yeah, listen, I'm dopey as hell. And I realized early on that I was the CEO of this organization.
Yeah.
And it was really incumbent upon me just to stay out of the way when it came to organization of our medical missions to Guyana, let's say. Right. We went deeply into the rainforest. We would set up makeshift medical clinics in schools, in prisons, in places where you would not think for a moment that there would be some sort of medical facility. And this was done by some outstanding employees of the organization. My strength was creating partnerships and doing some policy making and so on. But you're absolutely right. To get a team of 12 or 15 medical personnel to the rainforest of Guyana or to rural Zimbabwe with $1 million worth of pharmaceuticals in 40 different suitcases is bloody hard. It's not easy. And there were a lot of mistakes, I'll tell you.
Well, no, I was reading that you did it. It's like, holy crap. That must have been really hard. So have you been to any of these places yourself or no?
No. So the weird thing about me is I have since my father passed away, and I've worked on it. I'm getting better at it, but I'm not a world traveler at all. So I kind of stayed home and made things happen. I was the guy on the satellite phone,
Nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
No, that was good.
So let's go back. So you did all these things. How did you go from doing all these type of things to? I mean, you talked about when we spoke before. You're fascinating. I mean, how did you go to have your own radio show after all this? How did that come about? It was the Marty and Avrum show. It was about food. So how did this happen?
Yeah, it was 1996, and I was just about to start Via Hafta. My very dear friend Marty Gallen, who introduced me to many things. He took me out of the core of the Jewish community, and he would bring me downtown to where he lived within the gay community. And I was exposed to a new way of life, to a new understanding of humankind. And I'm always very grateful for what he did to me. I myself am not gay, but being introduced to that community and other such communities was an incredible eye opener for me, and something which was so healthy for me in terms of my own personal pursuits of life. I want to know people. I want to know communities. I want to know cultures.
We're similar like that. Yeah.
Right. I know you're like that. And what happened was Marty said, I'm starting to write for a gay magazine, and I'm doing it under the banner of I'm trying to remember. We had the funniest names. Would you want to write with me? I said, yeah, for sure. Tenderloin. He was Tenderloin, and I was Phil A. Like Phil, Phila.
Okay.
Anyway, so we wrote for this magazine for a while. These very bizarre, strange critiques of restaurants, always being positive so that we could get a free meal. And eventually that evolved into getting an audition and a gig at Talk 640 here in Toronto, and later on CFRB. We were at each.
They just heard you and offered you this, or you?
Yeah.
Really?
We were good. Yeah, we were really good.
Wow.
We had never done radio before, and our repertoire and our sense of timing with one another was amazing. And then we did talk radio for 10 years, and we did 4 TV shows. Yeah.
Yeah. How did that go? I saw the TV shows too. Like, oh my gosh. So how did that come in? That just transition from the radio into TV? Someone also?
Marty's a really interesting guy, Jonathan. I don't think he's ever had a notebook. I'm not sure that he has a bank account. He's one of those guys who, administratively speaking, is not conscious. Okay. But that being said, he used to tell me stories about approaching someone at a restaurant, sitting next to someone on a plane, whatever, talking and telling him about our show. And the fellow said, "Oh, I'm into watches." And Marty said, "Oh, that's great. What do you do?" He goes, "Well, I'm the CEO of Timex." And Marty goes, "So that's great. Would you like to sponsor our show?"
Oh my God.
Marty has balls the size of watermelons, So really, Marty was the one who really pushed this whole thing, while I was at the same time launching Veahavta, right?
Right.
I don't think I had a weekend off in 10 years.
Oh, that's amazing. That's just incredible to me. You feel, I mean, the whole thing just fell to you, and that's amazing. Like everyone listening must be like hating you who's trying to do this.
For sure. No, for sure. Listen, Jonathan, I went to a place of knowing Kishka and Kugel and Cholent, right? To understanding what beef carpaccio is, like all these fancy gourmet meals. We were invited to the most expensive restaurants. I remember once we walked out, we had a bunch of people that we'd always bring with us, and we never paid. And the bill was like $2,000. I remember once too ordering a particular cognac, King Henry the 13th or something like that. It's about $350 for a shot. Well, I thought it was $350 for the bottle. And later on, the waiter came up to us. They said, "Well, you're going to have to pay for this." I said, "What? We never pay." He said to me, "Well, this is a $2,000 bottle of cognac." I said, "What, are you kidding me?" It says $350. He goes, "Yeah, for a shot."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a crazy time.
So why did you stop doing this? I mean, why did you stop the show? To me, it's something like I would have gone for years and years and years just going through.
Yeah, it has its shelf life.
Yeah.
Honestly, Jonathan, there's only so many restaurants you can go to. There's only so much food you could eat. My refrigerator was stacked with beer from Molson's Canada. They would just send us things. Somebody wanted to give us Mercedes-Benz. Like, this went on and on and on. And after a while, you kind of think, Like, what is this crazy life about? And I hear you, by the way, even looking back on it, I go, man, I should have stayed in that. It's great. But it gets tedious. It really does. It gets really tedious. Even food, Jonathan, even food.
Yes.
If you eat too much of it too regularly, you can get tired of phenomenal food.
Everyone listening is going to be saying, "Oh, poor you."
Yeah, poor me. Exactly. No, I hear that. But like, I have a buddy, Massimo Capra, who's a very well-known Canadian chef. He's Italian, obviously. And I asked Massimo, I go, Mass, what do you do when you're not in your restaurants chefing, cooking? He goes, I'll go to McDonald's for a Big Mac. Right.
I absolutely can't see that. Just,
right.
Yes. That I can't see. Just enjoy like a little quick fast food meal. I could definitely see that.
Right.
So you stopped doing that. I want to know, first of all, until how long, because you have this fantastic podcast, also, I wouldn't say it's strictly Jewish theme, but it is, overall kind of like that, the Avrum Rosensweig Show. So you've had on some great guests. And so what made you start it? After how long were you doing the other thing? How did it come about? And for those who don't know, what's the theme of the podcast?
So I have a real need to be heard. I do. And I have a real need to articulate ideas. But more than all of that, I really want to bring a beautiful message of hope to the world. So my mission statement is the Avrum Rosensweig Show exists to pay homage to humankind through inspirational interviews. So as an example, when I was interviewing you, I was really fascinated how you live your life, your commitment, your love for your family, the stuff that you've written, and how you've applied your trade over the years. What a wonderful job you've done. I asked my listeners and my viewers to hear very closely, like to listen and hear what my guests are speaking about and try to emulate from them, to get into your own zone, to find your own passions. I want more than anything else in life, and I'm sure this is the rabbinical son in me, is to make people feel really good who they are and to feel inspired to find their zone, and to pursue it with a passion. And that really was the genesis of the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
After how long between you stopped doing like the TV and all that did you start the podcast? I mean,
yeah, there was quite a hiatus. I stopped doing the TV and radio in 2006. So we did it for a decade. And then I took a break and I really concentrated specifically on Via Hafta. 2015 or 2016, I took a bit of a sabbatical, came back, and then I retired from Via Hafta. So around 2020, 2021, I started the first iteration of my podcast, and it was okay. It was okay. But then after October 7th, I realized that it was really time for me to just dive right in and to become extremely serious about it and very focused on it. And to this day, I am very focused on it.
Yeah, I very similar. Like I said, we very similar in that aspect because, I do the other podcast with, talking like TV, movie people and stuff, but I'd always been thinking about Jewish things. And then after October 7th, it's like the same thing. I need to do this. I need to give voice to Jewish matters and Jewish, people and everything. So you've had on some amazing guests, and besides me, because that's obvious, but who are some of your favorite guests?
I have interviewed a fellow by the name of Nir Mammon 4 times, 3 times, and then his wife once.
I saw that.
Nir Mammon is 47 years old.
Yeah.
He lives in Richmond Hill, Ontario, which is a suburb of Toronto. He has 5 children.
Yeah.
And he has been deployed to Gaza 4 times since October 7th. He's about 6'3", probably about 220, 230. He's a warrior by nature. And every time he went to Israel, we would do a podcast right before he would go into Gaza. And we would talk about how he was feeling. And we would speak about, the courage required to do what he was doing, in particular because of his age, in particular because of his wife and family back home. he would really, really get down and dirty about who he was as a soldier by nature. And he told that story, as did his wife, by the way, Simone, in another interview that we're all kind of wondering about. I'm a wuss by nature. I'm a pachtan, as my girlfriend in Israel used to call me. I'm a scaredy cat. And I'm always wondering is, okay, Nir, you go through the gates of Gaza and you go into Rafah, and there you are, and the enemy is a few hundred meters away.
Terrifying, right.
And they have a machine gun pointed at you, just as you do. So we're talking life and death. How do you deal with that? And how do you deal with that knowing clearly you have 5 children back home? You could have stayed in Richmond Hill. These are questions that I really, really want to understand. And it was a magnificent series that we did.
She was fascinating to hear you speak with her as well.
Simone, yeah,
she was great on there. So you no longer. Let me go on here. Say I had something that I wanted. Oh yes, so you teach Torah now. This is what's fascinating to me. Also, you teach Torah now. So do you do that is regularly? Is that what you are now? Are you a teacher? Is that what you do like as a profession, kind of, or no?
Well, I try very hard to be multidimensional because I don't want to get bored with anything. But I love our people. I really do. I'm ask me who I am. I'm first a man and then I'm a Jew. And I have been living within a Jewish society construct since I was born. So despite the fact that I left Orthodoxy,
that's the part that gets to me. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
You left that, but you're still teaching Torah. So why is that?
Right. So I have never been comfortable with living a halachic lifestyle. I just haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever kept Shabbat, Jonathan?
I'll say that. Look, we do Shabbat. My family does Shabbat, and even as a kid, I could go out Friday nights. My parents would let me go out Friday nights. Not till Shabbat was over. Not till the meal was over and we did Shabbat together. Then I could go out Friday nights. Afterwards.
I couldn't.
Right, yeah. But Shabbat is very special to me even to this day.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
But I couldn't. And I was home all day unless I was in shul. Mm-hmm. And I wore tzitzit all the time. Right. And I put on tefillin every single day, right? And when it came time to Yom Kippur, our fast would start at the appropriate time and, when it was supposed to. And I had to do everything that was expected of me as a halachic child, if you will, a halachic Jew. And it wasn't something that I ever felt comfortable with. And I remember even as a youngster riding on my banana bike over to McDonald's and grabbing one of their milkshakes, which were divine, and doing these little things, which my father definitely would not be happy with. And the moment that I had the ability, I was about 21 years old, to say, okay, enough is enough. I don't want this anymore. I don't enjoy it. I don't like it. It's not fulfilling for me. I stopped being halachic. That being said, I never really stopped studying Torah. Never stopped studying Torah because I was so deeply intrigued by our biblical characters. If you've ever studied Talmud, Jonathan, and I do every single day, I'm involved in a program called Daf Yomi. And Daf Yomi is learning one page of Talmud every day, both sides, for 7.5 years until you finish the entire Shas, which is the compendium of all the tractates, of all the Talmuds. I learn it every single day, and I have for 4.5 years. I have 3 years to go. Okay?
Oh my.
I am fascinated by our history. I'm fascinated by our culture. And when you study Talmud and you hear sort of the multi-generational argumentation that happens between one rabbi in the year 200 and one rabbi in the year 300, and they're talking about something, Hashutvim shratzu lachsos mechitza boni netakol biemsa. If two partners own a piece of land and they have a fence in the middle and that fence falls and it's made out of a particular material, who's responsible for building it up? Okay. And the Talmud goes back and forth, what's called a shakla v'taryak. It's Aramaic for this. We'll go this way, we'll go that way. There's funny stuff in the Talmud. There's great stories called Haggadah. Our gift as Jews is Torah. It is Torah. Now, while I don't follow it to a T and I'm criticized for that, I love the development of my intellect. I love the development of my soul as a Jew in just learning Torah and being able to teach to others. So whatever anybody wants to do with it, it's their call. What I've done with it is I've deeply enjoyed the process.
Again, we have. First, I'm curious: are your sisters still Orthodox, religious, or no? They are.
I have four sisters. One passed away during COVID.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And they are all Orthodox. Most of their children are Orthodox. Yeah.
Are or
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a bad cold. Most of their children are Orthodox. Yes.
A lot of the stuff that you say, again, we have similar things. I grew up in a kosher household, and the first time I remember it was in high school that I snuck having a cheeseburger the first time. I was like, oh my God, this is delicious.
Right. Yes, it is.
And, I did kept non-kosher for very many years until I was going to start a family. And I said, all right, I'm going to dive back in again to observing this. But for many years, I was I had all the things that you're mentioning, and they were delicious. I never had bacon, really. I never straight in my mind. I could eat the unkosher, but it was if I went to like pork or shellfish, that was like the big taboo. I could not cross the line. It was like in my mind, you can't do this. This is it. There's only so many lines.
Yes, correct. A lot of people feel that way.
Right. So now you're also an artist. So I went to your site, the Rosensweig Art, fantastic pieces there. What would you say was kind of the style? Where did that come from? When did you first know that you had a talent for that as well? You're like a Renaissance guy. I mean, you're like dabbling in a lot of
no.
So
thank you for saying that. I like that. When I was 5 years old, I drew a picture of an English bobby, and I showed it to my teacher, Miss Bainan, and she pronounced to the entire class that this was a piece of art. And I felt great about it. I didn't pick up a brush, however, until I was about 30 years old.
So you didn't know at all that you had talent for this beforehand, or no?
No, as I was saying, Jonathan, I didn't come from that world.
Right.
There was no sense of, son, wow, you are so talented, and look at your art, and let's go out and buy you a canvas and an easel. There was none of that, right? Again, I don't know what it was like in your family, but I was a bit on my own. Like I taught myself, right?
Wow.
Yeah, I taught myself. And really that's not criticism of who my parents were, because that's who they were. And I learned a lot from them through osmosis. My humanitarian work, my Jewish work, that's all stuff that I got from home. But anyways, the long and short of it is one day I decided, after seeing this very interesting three-dimensional bowl with fruits in it.
I read that. That's a thing of fruit is what inspired you for art. I was I was like, wow, I could not believe that of all the things. So what inspired you about that?
I don't know. But to this day, when I see the colors, when I see the shapes, when I see the foreground and the background are both very important to me, I decided that I was going to go out and buy a canvas and buy some brushes and paint. And I was going to give it a go around, and I did. I painted 3 paintings. I'm looking at them now. They're on my wall, my very first ones. And one thing led to another, Jonathan, and I just started to paint on a regular basis. Van Gogh was very much my inspiration, by the way. Obviously is to many, many people. But when I read about Van Gogh and I studied his art, it really spoke to me. So a lot of times people will look at my art, they go, oh, there's shades of Van Gogh in there, or sometimes Chagall. But I was really, really taken by it. And to me, there was nothing greater than sitting in my art studio, in my condo, having a joint, putting on some Lynyrd Skynyrd or Leon Russell, and just going about a painting. It was just so joyful.
Well, I do urge people to check it out. A lot of fantastic pieces on your site. And I was just going through all of them before you came on, this week.
Yeah,
so
thanks.
It was really, people should check it out. Now, so I have to ask, you've been involved like in every little thing I could think of there too. You've at least dabbled in. What's next?
Well, I want to stay on the road with my podcast. I'm really, really passionate about it. But what I want to add to it is a tikkun olam component. Tikkun olam means repairing the world. And that's what I did for 20 years at Via Hafta and 7 years at the United Jewish Appeal and growing up as a rabbinical child. I really want to take my podcast down a road which is somewhat unique in nature, whereby not only do you listen to the podcast, but you have the ability to tap into a program or programs of either a local or international natures, like stuff we did in Zimbabwe and Guyana. So I want to extend the podcast so that there's a practical component to it, not just listening to it, not just getting inspired by the guests, but by saying, yeah, you know what, for $50, I can actually sponsor a kid for an entire year in Glendale, Zimbabwe, which is rural Zimbabwe. And we've done that. Amazing. So that's next. I really want to take it down that road.
That's fantastic. And I do urge, again, people to check out. It's a fantastic podcast. And so many, you have a variety of guests, a wide variety of guests as well. So how can people follow you on all your social media channels?
Right. So if they want to find my show, it's I have a YouTube channel and it's called the Avrum Rosensweig Show. I'm on all major social media outlets in terms of as far as Spotify goes and Podbean, and you'll find me. Just do a Google search on the Avrum Rosensweig Show. If you want to see my art, you can go to my website, which is avrumrosensweigart.com. And I also have just a regular website where you'll find my stuff in general, which is avrumrosensweig.com. So yeah, somewhere in there you'll find me, you know.
Fun site as well. Your website is also a fun site also, by the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Avrum, again, thank you so much for coming on. I had such a fun time talking. Both times. I had fun talking to you twice now. So it's
been fun, John, and I've enjoyed it too.
Yeah.
You know what I like about being interviewed by you and talking to you is you're very effusive in nature. Like you're very excited and curious. People say to me, like, how does one become a great interviewer? Well, you have to listen really well, and you're a good listener, and you have to be curious as hell and be able to articulate a question. And you have all three of those. So thank you so much. Thank you.
I feel likewise with you. So yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. But again, thank you very much. And and hopefully it'll be the first of many times we interact. The second of many times, yes. But again, this has been the Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. And again, a very special thanks to Avrum Rosensweig. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to the Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.